Hello, welcome to Afroshine Live. It's Clyde Shirati here, and I'm very happy to know that you are all you've been waiting for this show for tonight, and we're very excited that we're getting a lot of positive feedback from the community in relation to the show. Afroshine is a platform where we want to highlight good things happening in the community, showcase the professional and business and social talents that we've got. And tonight we're talking about a very important topic. We're still in a confinement mode, even though things are starting to, you know, be released a bit. It's getting a little less complicated than it was over the last few weeks. So we'll be talking about Corona crisis and how it has affected and continues, and more likely is going to continue to affect the African communities in particular. So tonight I have with me Francis Aqua, who is from Positive Mental Health Program. I'm going to ask him to introduce himself in just a little while. I also have Alice Ntobezi, who's a clinical psychologist, and Lynette Gesora, who is a social worker. And together we're going to be looking at many aspects of how this crisis is affecting the African community. So I'll go to Francis. Francis, I've introduced you a little bit, but tell our viewers a bit more about yourself.
So this is Francis Aqua. I'm a mental health nurse and clinical director of Positive Mental Health Program based in Epping. And we are looking after people with a range of mental health issues. And I've been doing this work for quite a long time. I'll talk more about things as we go along.
Thanks very much, Francis. Alice, tell us a bit more about yourself.
My name is Alice Ntobezi. I'm a clinical psychologist and I have been in the field as well for many years, having worked in public mental health and now for the past 9 years working in my private practice and as a life coach.
I can't hear Alice.
Well, we can't hear Alice, but I can hear perfectly well. We'll see if we can improve that in just a moment. We're going to go to Lynette. Lynette, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lynette Gesora. I'm a clinical mental health social worker. I practice at Positive Mental Health. I have a background in child protection and mental health, and also I do private practice for the last 5 years. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. I'll kick off with you, Francis. Tell us, how do you think this whole Corona crisis and the confinement is affecting multicultural communities in general, and Africans communities in particular? We know that the whole of the society is being affected, but we want to see what are some of the issues that particularly are relevant to the African communities and the multicultural communities.
Well, as many people will be aware, most of the people from the multicultural background has experienced some trauma prior to coming to Australia. So either come from war-torn countries or coming through as refugees, or sometimes migrating under economic circumstances. Unfortunately, when they arrive in this country, they experience a range of discrimination that always goes back to affect their health, and generally their mental health. And as you know, from Africa, we don't actually recognize mental illness in its form as it is here. And so people don't usually seek help, and they don't confine in their issues to other professionals until they are really, really in dire straits. So most of the time, we only go through the mental health services through the back door. That's it, when we are affected by significant issues, when people have been experiencing, it could be drug and alcohol, it could be domestic violence, it could be caring for their wayward children, and therefore it becomes a really, really difficult times. And this coronavirus situation is impacting on us because we have a whole range of things to care for. We are used to having our food. Basically, our funds are based on getting money today, spending it today, and not thinking about tomorrow. So at the moment, we know that a lot of people are out of work and it's impacting on them. How do they care for their children? Do homeschooling in addition to all the expenses that they have to care for.
Sure, we're going to go into some of those issues in a bit more details as we go along. Alice, let me ask you, you're a clinical psychologist. How do you see things from your end? Are you getting calls from people? What are some of the issues you see in relation to people who come in and talk to you about these sort of things?
Sure. I know that you started the conversation asking about the African community in particular. But I'll speak on a general note because I believe that a lot of issues are affecting all of us in the same way. So I have seen people that have had have faced a number of issues. I mean, when things happen and people, it's unpredictable and they were not prepared. It's one way in which people can find it difficult to cope because they were not prepared and they haven't been able to work through what's necessary to prepare them for themselves for the situation. Things being out of control, not knowing what the future holds, and not knowing, whether the jobs will still be secure in the future, especially in the economic climate that we live in. Isolation is a big thing for anyone who might already be vulnerable. Francis talking about histories of trauma, especially for many of the Africans that have moved to Australia. I think they can be really, really vulnerable during this time and most likely to have relapse of their traumatic conditions as well. So on a different level, when I've spoken to clients, it's been really helping them to build up their coping mechanisms again, adjust to the current conditions as much as possible, and continuing ways to just keep building resilience and in different ways to meet their needs at this time.
Thank you, Alice. Lynette, you're a social worker. I'm sure you would come across quite a few a lot more cases where people are having a range of issues. Tell us what you see from your end.
Hi, just as my colleagues have said, there's a few challenges for African migrants, especially depending on their journey of migration, whether they come as students, whether they come as refugees, whether they come as skilled migrants. That determines how they're going to cope in the long run, especially like now there's a crisis. So I'm getting a lot of inquiries from students who have migrated here for studies, and with this coronavirus issue, they don't have any status to give them a chance to actually get any support locally. And we know it's a global issue, so they're not able to get that support from home either. They can't go back and they can't really get the local government supports as such, like free counseling. And if anything, they also fear going to seek for that help because it's not a natural process that they're not used to getting that kind of support back home. So that's a big issue. And the other thing is the reverse of gender roles. We know women come here, they're able to settle in, they can adjust to any new challenges. They might do care work to survive. But we have our men who have come here as professionals. Some of them have PhD, some of them are medical doctors, some of them have those prestigious roles that we come from with back home, but they can't do it here. So because of that, we're seeing an increasing number of men abusing alcohol and drug issues because they're really struggling to settle. And those are some of the challenges that I face in the community, and also the stigma of going to get help from a government service in case your community knows about it. We are a small community as Africans, so there's that fear that if my friends get to know that I'm not coping well, I'll be a laughingstock. So we are seeing an increasing number of family violence cases and overrepresentation of African migrants in the child protection system and the police or the justice system. So those are some of the issues that I'm seeing in the community, and our people are really struggling.
Okay, thank you very much. Francis, let me get back to you. What do you think, how do you see the role of the government in handling the whole crisis so far, both in general for the whole community, as well as if there's anything that they have done to attend to the needs of multicultural communities and other vulnerable communities in this whole crisis. Francis, you with us? Hello, Francis.
Sorry, I missed that question. Is that for
Yeah,
me?
the question is, what do you see the role of the government in how they've been handling this crisis in general, as well as whether they've done anything to attend to the needs of the multicultural communities and other vulnerable communities? Are you having difficulty to hear us?
I'm really having difficulty hearing.
Okay.
Just
If you can hear
put
me
on
again,
my
I'll try to
headphone.
repeat one more time. It's about the role of the government. Okay, we will come back to you in a moment, Francis. Let me ask Lynette. Lynette, what do you think about that? Do you think the government has been responding well to the needs of the communities in general and multicultural communities in particular?
From my personal observation and analysis, I think the government is trying really hard to cope with the current crisis, but we kind of lumped together as Australians, and we have varying needs in terms of how we cope with this challenge. We, as an African community, we are very resilient, but also we are not people who go out to seek naturally, to seek for support in a majority culture whereby we always have our own stigma to go out and be judged. So we pretend that we are coping, but in real sense, there are people who are actually suffering with mental illness. I've had a few friends inquire from me about a friend of a friend who they know is struggling with alcohol issues because they're isolated. Some families migrated 7 weeks before the lockdown, and they have hardly settled into the system. And then there's coronavirus, so they don't even know how to seek support because they came when there was lockdown and they don't know how to access the government supports even if they're there. So it's a major crisis, which I think African families are struggling to cope with, but they're doing their best to do whatever they can to survive.
Well, Alice, maybe you don't necessarily get into contact with government services a lot in your work, or maybe you do, I'm not sure. I would want to hear from you about that. Or if you don't have too much interaction with the government, how do you see the way major services, health services, have been handling this crisis overall?
Sure. I mean, it has been very difficult because a lot of services now have moved online. So which I think that's one positive, because it meant that while people are isolating at home, they can have access to services, either the ones that they had already been using before, or be able to access new services as well. So, and that was the government actually bringing that on board, because normally it's not allowed to actually do phone services with mental health clients. It's always important that you are in the same room doing a mental health assessment to be able to see how they present to you, their mental state, which cannot always be assessed very well over the phone or on video. So that's a positive, that people can readily access services. But the other problem we find is that it's not always that services are enough. There's sometimes a limit on the number of services that people can access. And when people are at home and they're in isolation, it can also be very difficult for them to find that motivation to access the services, even though they might know there's someone to ring. So it's a complex situation, but I think the government has tried by making services available, not in the normal way, but it's accessible easily than before.
Okay, Francis, can you hear us now? Hello, Francis? No, we're still having a bit of an issue with Francis there. Alice, let me get back to you again. What are some of the coping strategies that you would suggest as a clinical? Sorry, you can hear us, Francis? We can hear you.
I think we're having challenge with. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
No.
We can hear you. Okay, we'll get back to you, Francis. All right. Yeah. Alice, what do you think? What are some of the coping strategies mechanisms and strategies you would suggest for people to deal with this whole stressful situation for many families and individuals?
Sure. I mean, there's a wide range of issues as already have been mentioned in terms of stress, having family at home, changes in roles, and it could be mental health issues that are existing, or newly triggered mental health issues, alcohol, drugs. So there's going to not be one strategy to fit every one of those scenarios. But the best way I can try is that I think as human beings, we are very resilient as well. And as Africans, we've gone through so much already through our lives to be here. So I always say to people that our mindset and the way we might process information about the events that are happening in our lives is always a powerful tool that we can have. I think taking the time to reflect on what's happened and putting things into perspective is one way in which somebody can gain a bit of an understanding of their experience. And as they do work through strategies around their mind and putting it into perspective, that can shift their emotional reactions as well. I often say that our emotions are communicating to us what we need to know about the experience we're having, but it's also about what are the other ways in which we can release the emotion? Exercise, meditations. I know that that's probably not some of the things that Africans might be into, like meditations. It's about calming the mind and actually gaining clarity and gaining focus and being able to calm the nervous system, because this is a time when people are highly stressed and highly anxious. So it's targeting what the body system is doing in reaction to this external circumstances. There's a broader change as well, which can be done externally, but we're very limited on, because we're not going out, we're not going to jobs. We can focus on the internal resources about our mind and reducing the stress on the nervous system. On another level, I think is being, as a family, working as a whole unit and continuing to be a close knit, working together so that you can move forward together in this without dividing. Because I think you can only be as strong as you can be around those around you.
Absolutely. All right. That's a very good strategies there, Alice. Let me try Francis again to see if he can hear us. Francis, can you hear us? Francis? No, we're not lucky with Francis today. Lynette, as a social worker, what would you suggest to people out there to help them address this whole corona crisis, confinement / crisis situation?
I guess what I try and encourage our people is that even though we are physically separated, we can still use social media in connecting. So use of video to call our friends or family wherever they are is a one way of connecting to each other, and reaching out to those people who are normally if they go quiet or if they seem to be doing like physically presenting well, it doesn't mean they're not struggling. So trying to reach out to people who go quiet because they could be really struggling because of the way we are functioning at the moment. We are quite isolated and we're not able to physically visit each other, because Africans, we are very warm people. We visit each other, we laugh, we joke, we eat together. We can't do that. A few days ago, we had a teleconference on Zoom, and we had a few friends, over like 30 people, and we were able to have like dinner while we were watching each other on camera. So that was really a good way of us reaching each other without compromising the physical safety that we need at the moment. The other thing I would suggest is positive thinking. If we think positively, we can actually overcome mental health issues. Knowing that there's some light at the end of the tunnel, the government is working hard to provide the resources. We have to look after each other before the government actually can do it for us. So positive thinking is a big thing for us. Getting out of the house 10, 20, 30 minutes, even if we can't really go very far, is really good for the mental health exercise. That will give us some space to reflect and also some space from each other, because we are used to working, but now we are actually working from home with the kids schooling from home. It's not an easy way to cope. And reaching out, if you're struggling, call the school, call your doctor, talk to somebody, at least help is out there. We have various government numbers like the mental health crisis number. We have the family violence number. Those numbers are anonymous, beyond the blue. Just reach out. It's okay to reach for help. It's not a weakness, it's a strength.
Well, thank you very much, Lynette. Let me try Francis once more. Francis, you there? Let's try. I'll try to ring Francis, see if we can get him over the phone, as opposed to video. Let's see if that works.
I can't hear you at all.
All right, but we can hear you, and we can put you. We can just do sound as opposed to
Okay.
to video. You can hear us, okay?
I can. It's breaking up now. I can hear you, but before I can't hear you at all.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure what that is. Alice and Lynette, can you hear Francis?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means it's all working fine. I was asking a question, Francis, in relation to number one, the role of the government in handling this crisis in general, as well as what they have done in particular in relation to multicultural communities and African communities in particular. Do you have anything to say in relation to that?
Well, unfortunately, the governments keep putting in money to what I would describe as the so-called big services that have marks. So people like Beyond Blue, Lifeline are the ones who have received the lion's share of the funding.
Mm-hmm.
But our people don't call Lifeline. Our people don't call Beyond Blue. And despite advertisements on the TV, I heard what Lynette was saying. We are used to, gathering together, sitting, having a chat, eating together. So reaching out to, I'm talking about the multicultural community in general.
Mm-hmm.
We have different ways of gathering. We like festivals. We like socialization. And being confined to our homes, we are not getting this interaction with other people. We are not able to call somebody at midnight to just talk. We want to actually see somebody, meet somebody, and do things. So we have to think outside the square. We've come out with our own program, which we are available to provide support. I must say, we haven't received many calls from that, but we know that in order for people to reach us, we have to go to them. And so whether this COVID virus, the lockdown comes out very quickly, we have to find different ways of approaching people, letting the community know that yes, there are people who are willing to help them if they are in crisis. For example, we have a lot of students who some communities are actually cooking and providing food for them.
Yeah.
The crunch will come when they have to pay their school fees, or even the lockdown is open. How do they get to pay their school fees when they haven't been working? And what are the supports in terms of accommodation? We're hearing that the homeless have been found accommodation, but sooner or later, some of these people will need to pay their rent, and if they can't pay their rent, how are they going to cope?
Okay.
So we are sitting on the bombshell at the moment, and we are making ourselves available to assist these people.
No problem. Thank you very much, Francis. Now, I'll go back to you, Lynette, perhaps still talking about some of the social crises that would actually continue to unfold, because I think, part of the problem is that, because of the confinement and everything, many of the issues are not necessarily being sort of quite clearly visible, but as the crisis continues, maybe at a later stage, we'll continue to see a lot more issues coming out. Is that your feeling as well? Do you agree with that sort of assessment?
I suspect that after coronavirus, the family system and the social interaction system will have changed. So people are getting used to social media. The parents who are struggling with currently with allowing the kids to actually go back to school. Yet we know that our education systems are run differently. And so we are not able to support these kids to the maximum level at home. But at the same time, it's hard for us to let them go back to school. Myself being a parent, that's my struggle. It's like, what if they go back and get the virus? So we are going to have a lot of anxiety because every time people go out now, we know they might bring the virus home. So it's going to be a big challenge, a big adjustment issue for most families. So we're more likely to see an increase of mental illness like depression or anxiety because there's a fear of the unknown and the fear that we can't control what's going to happen when they come home. And that's likely to be a big challenge. And then
Alice,
the
what
other
if?
factor is that we have a lot of
Yep.
uncertainty in terms of jobs. So we don't know whether what normal is going to look like because a lot of our people have lost jobs and we don't know whether they, after this finishes, how long will it take for the economy to go back to normal so that people can get back to jobs again. So there's the financial aspect, there's also the mental health aspect. And of course, that brings other social issues like family violence and that complicates issues more.
All right, thank you very much. Alice, what do you think? Do you think down the line, 3 months, 6 months, we are likely to see many other issues that have not surfaced at this point as yet?
Look, I think that we're yet to see what will happen. I'm hoping that especially if you look in Victoria, and that isolation has helped to some degree for the spread. And if we do end up going back to our normal lives and the numbers do stay down, or we don't know because we don't know which direction they're going to go. So I think what we're going to see in the future is going to depend on that the numbers and what people are seeing in the media to give them comfort or to increase their fears. I think if we start to rebuild and people are starting to see a bit of confidence in the government and the jobs coming back, a lot of people will still struggle because it meant that a lot of companies that may have closed may not open. So we're going to see a lot of people that may not have jobs for a long time. So yeah, we're yet to see. I think it's all going to depend on has the current structure helped to prevent a further spread in the future.
Thank you. Francis, I asked this question to the other two guests before when you're having technical issues there. What do you think are some of the best strategies to help people address, especially things such as mental health issues in your area, which is in your area of expertise? Francis?
Thinking that you are not alone.
Yeah.
You are not alone means that there are other people who can assist you. And in Australia, our first point of call is our GP. So the GP can then refer you to a specialist. We have what we call the mental health care plan or the mental health treatment plan. The mental health treatment plans allows for GP to refer somebody to a psychologist, a clinical mental health clinician or social worker like Lynette, a mental health nurse like myself, or even to a extent a psychiatrist. And we also have counselors as well. Obviously, we always say we need to be careful with people being referred to counselors because sometimes they're not the most qualified people, but they are also there. You don't need a referral to go and see a counselor. But the first point of call is being able to go and talk to someone. Obviously, in our tradition as well, we have other people where you can go for confinement, such as priests, or it's Ramadan at the moment, going to the mosque and speaking to the person in the mosque as well. And with education these days, they also know how to refer people to those services. I guess, like everybody is saying, now we are getting used to some of these online services. So there are also online services that people can access as well.
Okay, Francis, I'll just take a question from a member of the audience. Bumi Ajayi, who says, are we more or less prone to the COVID-19 infection based on our lifestyle, communal living tendencies, etc., as a people group? Who would like to be able to answer the question? Whether it's you, Francis, Alice, or Lynette, I'll let you go for it. Are we likely to be prone to infection because of our lifestyle or communal living tendencies?
I think we might, if we continue with the way we used to do things, if we continue going back to the communal style and we're not very careful with our hygiene practices, we are more likely to do that, to get infected more. Yesterday, I lost a good friend of mine from COVID-19. Unfortunately, she traveled to the UK and got locked up and contracted the disease. What I was reminded is that anybody can get it, and it doesn't matter. She's a young woman. She's energetic, lively. She's a nurse, but she got it. So we have to have self awareness at all costs. On how we actually relate with each other and where we have been, we have to be really careful that we are um, um, susceptible to the virus like any other person, and so we have to really be careful.
Okay.
I agree. I think, yes.
Alice,
Yeah, I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say, I agree that we'll continue to leave the steps in place, social distancing, or even the numbers of people that are going to be congregating in one place at one time. We'll continue to limit that for as long as necessary. I think to go back too quickly to our normal way of life might put us at really high risk.
Francis, did you want to say something about that?
I wouldn't like to go for a morbid one, but look, I actually saw a funeral online today, and yes, the people practice social distancing, and there were fewer people at the funeral. So yeah, we have to start thinking, and we have to start changing some of our behaviors.
Yeah.
I always say, what is normal? I have got my imported mask from Africa, and nobody actually flinches and look at me that, oh my God, this is weird, because we are all wearing it now. We are all wearing masks, so that has become a normal thing, and we have to keep doing things, making sure we keep to their hygiene.
Okay. Now, moving on to what we as a community can do, I suppose, beyond individual actions, our community organizations, groups, and associations, churches, and all that sort of thing. Lynette, that may be more relevant in your area. What would you advise community leaders to do to best help their community members?
As community leaders and members, we have to reach out to our vulnerable members of the community. So young people especially, and the old and frail. I know we are a young generation, first migrants, most of us, but we have to reach each other and just ask, are you okay? How is this affecting you? Most of us are also in the helping professions. Most Africans come here and do nursing or social workers or aged care or disability. So those are the most susceptible jobs whereby we are more likely to be vulnerable to get those infections. How can we protect each other, take extra caution? I hear that in the UK and USA, where the African migrants are more dominating in that healthcare sector, a few of them have unfortunately succumbed to coronavirus. We need to be careful. We need to look after each other. We need to reach out for help. And if we know somebody's being affected, we need to be there, continue to even prepare meals and drop to the families if we know that they're struggling. So let's always exercise Ubuntu and remember that you are because we are. And with that spirit, we can overcome this.
Let me just remind those who are watching, we again want to thank you for staying and watching. We encourage you to watch, to share the video and also ask questions if you can. And we can also potentially even bring you into the studio to ask your question on video if you want to do that. Otherwise, you can just put a comment. Now, one person here, Teresia Kanye, has asked the question, how can you address the intergenerational tension between young people and the older generation in relation to their understanding of mental health? I suppose that's a more broad question, but with regards to this crisis, is there some sort of intergenerational tension there in how this situation may affect people? Perhaps Alice, you may want to tackle this one.
So without just reading the question and trying to understand exactly where it's coming from, I'm also just having in mind that maybe we're talking about having young people and maybe their parents at home for a long time, extended period of time, whereas it's not usually the case, and the problems that young people might be going through, and maybe a lack of understanding from an older person that children might have same problems as, because they're also facing the same situation. So I would say maybe the message goes more than maybe to parents or the older generation to keep in mind that children are as affected as adults in this situation. And for parents to take the time sometimes to ask the question, to see how they're coping, and to also help to put some coping mechanisms in place. I encourage people that if you have a backyard, it's okay to go outside in the backyard when the sun is out, to connect together that way. So that will be a parent taking that initiative and making sure that their children are also still getting, being taken care of from that mental health point of view. It takes that 30 minutes of just doing something that breaks the day can make a huge difference in the way we cope.
Francis, you got anything to say on this?
Well, it's about the encouragement, but it's about also us getting into what I basically say is a routine. It's, how do you put it? If there's a quiet bird around the corner, you don't hear it whisper, and you think everything is fine. But it's about going back and checking. So it's no good when the kids are doing their homework in their bedroom and actually they are sleeping, or for that matter, they are actually chatting to their friends. It's about helping them to check in on them on a regular basis, having, proper meals. It's been said so many times, but even getting outside, getting some fresh air, and having some chores for them to do. Life is still going on. That's the key point. We are still living. So the family needs to communicate, and it's about how do we work together. We can't leave the children to say, do your thing by yourself, and then the adults are out there saying they are working, and then you come back to the kitchen and the house is burning. So they have to be working together.
Good. By the way, let me ask you a question. I know Australia overall has had very low number of dead or victims of this whole crisis compared to countries such as Italy, America, and China, and the rest. But does any of you here know of any African Australian person that has passed away as a result of this corona thing in Victoria, or perhaps even the rest of Australia?
No, I would say I'm not aware of anyone.
Not aware of anyone, although my intelligence has said there has been a couple of suicides in the African community since the lockdown. And obviously we can't specify that they were as a direct result of the
corona. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, at least we think that's a good news. And obviously, any death is regrettable. But compared to America, for example, where I hear there's a high percentage of Black Americans who have passed away and who are dying in relation to this crisis. But obviously, the health system in America is much different from Australia, and that's partly how, I suppose, that's partly why we are coping relatively quite well in terms of keeping this crisis under control, isn't it?
That's correct. Yes.
All right. Before we finish, let's talk about international students of African. I think Lynette, you mentioned that there, and I've had a couple of inquiries through African media where some were asking where they could get help. One actually did that earlier today, and Francis, I may send you their contact number. I've asked them to authorize me to do that. Are you getting a sense that there are a lot more African students, especially those international ones, who are coping? I mean, who are not coping well, but who perhaps don't know where to go and what to do to get help?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I've had a few inquiries
Yeah.
through friends, and I've given them the African mental health line, but also
Yeah.
they say the students can also access support through the university because there's the student well-being office, which usually deals with international students, and all through their insurance company, they can't be able to get a mental health support. So it's a question of them knowing what to do when they're stuck, because mental health is a young issue in the African community. We are getting educated on what mental health means because people just cope with it because their family is there to support you all through the extended family. So when you are here, that's when you realize it's not good to actually share whatever is disturbing you. So we need to reach out to them. If you know one or two students who are around, just check on them, and also advise them on where they can get help, especially if their mental health is declining. Instead of them going to use substances like alcohol or drugs, it's better for them to get the right supports at the right time.
Yes, Francis, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah. So our mental health telehealth is available, and we have a number. If I may call, it's 1300
Yeah.
025
Yeah.
864
025.
864.
Okay, we'll put that number on the screen so that people can use it if they need to make contact. That's good. I have one more question from the audience. Miss Irene Munga says, what are your thoughts on post-COVID effects on African communities in general, and what advice would you give for families after this whole confinement thing is finished? What should families be prepared for, and how they should handle things? Who wants to take it?
I guess we are not used to staying together after migrating overseas. We are always on the run looking for resources to support our families. And
Yeah.
this COVID 19 has actually put us together in one box for 24 hours, 7 days a week. And it's not an easy way to adjust. You start noticing small things which you couldn't even on your children. So I encourage you to be patient, to be resilient, to actually get to know each other as a family and enjoy the isolation, because this is kind of like a stopgap for us to actually rain check ourselves and see, do I really know my children? Do I really know my partner well? What is happening in your life? How is mental health? How is COVID-19 affecting my children? Because we might assume that they actually don't feel anything. They do. They're missing their friends. They're missing their relationships outside home. And we just think that for them to thrive, their lifestyle is different from us. They are missing their connections they have established, and they are stuck with mom and dad who are telling them to wash dishes and cook and read books all the time. We need to adjust our lifestyles to actually meet the needs of the young people we are raising in Australia and in the Western society. So that's, I think, post this, we have a learning curve to understand perhaps our parenting style. We need to readjust that and reach our kids closer to actually know what's affecting them outside there.
Alice?
Yes,
Any comment?
I agree. Yeah, I agree there. So, yes, I think it is important that every crisis, I think, or a challenge that we face helps us to also learn something new about ourselves and about others. So moving forward, I think there'll be new things that parents have learned about their children or families in general. The challenges that might have arisen, but I think everybody's working together in a family so that they are less impacted as much as possible. But I think it's continuing to use any of the supports that we've already started, because I think this might be that when people are starting to connect this way, this is something that's going to be needed, because even the impact of COVID-19 might not necessarily that when we go back to normal, people's mental health would go back to normal immediately as well. So it will still be important to just continue to be aware and continue to, building resilience. And I think when we do build resilience now, we're building that for the future as well, because we'll still face other issues.
Thank you, Alice. Francis, let me ask you, I know you work with the prison system. How is, I'm not sure if you've continued to work with them throughout this confinement thing. If you have, what's the situation? I would imagine many people will be quite afraid in a prison because of the quite confined space that it is, and the high risk of being contaminated. Do you have anything you can say in relation to that?
No, unfortunately not. Currently not working directly in the prison system or the youth justice system.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what's happening in that area, but yeah.
No problem. That's all good. Maybe we'll start concluding. I'm gonna ask any of you, I mean all of you basically, to say final comments before we conclude. What would you like to tell the community in relation to this whole corona situation, and perhaps lift their spirit a little bit? We'll start with you, Alice, as a psychologist. You always know what to say.
I think that look, it is an important time that we've all really been challenged, but there's not ever a challenge that sticks with us forever. I think it's always important to know that we've experienced this, but it will pass, and it will take its time, but we will always come out greater. Our leaders in our community as well, I think it's important. The message tonight was about support, and continuing to reach out to those that need help, that might not necessarily have access to family or other supports, or not know where to get the support, that we can reach out to other people and share the information that's needed.
Thank you for that, Alice. Lynette, what would you say?
I think help is out there. Let's support each other, but also reach out to the support services that are provided by the government and also by the community. There's some window, but we don't know yet where this is going to be. And let's try and support our children and the young people to actually feel safe. It's going to be different when they go out. They might feel like they need to just catch up with what they have missed and maybe break the boundaries, which might get them into the prison system or the justice system. So let's try and be supportive of each other. And hey, we need each other all the time.
Absolutely, we do need each other. Francis, what will be your concluding comment?
Well, mine goes a different direction, but the Chinese actually says a crisis is an opportunity. So it's an opportunity for change. It's an opportunity to be together, opportunity to love and share our great country together, and really what everybody else has said, support each other, and knowing that we are not alone, but we are a community together.
Okay, thank you very much, Francis. We are not alone, we are a community together. We will go through this crisis. It is an opportunity to rethink our lives, to rethink our connections, to rethink the way we live, and how we can make this world a better place, and how we can protect ourselves. There are a lot of things that come with regards to this crisis, but Africans have always been quite resilient people, and the broader community is in Australia here is doing quite well despite the challenges. So I would like to say thank you very much to all of you for your time to Africa Media Australia. We will try to find more opportunities to continue to talk about this whole situation, especially some of those things that we can expect to see after the confinement has been put behind us. Well, there will certainly be issues with regards to people who have employment issues and other social-related issues. So thank you very much again, and we hope to see you next time on Africa Media Australia again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Have a good night.
Good night. Bye.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.